While digging in his vineyard in the 1500s, a farmer made an accidental discovery that would change the course of art forever. Beneath the soil was a tangle of limbs, marble bodies, twisted in torment, serpents coiled around them. Word spread quickly through the city of Rome, and within hours, a crowd had formed to see the ancient treasure emerging from the ground. Michelangelo himself rushed to the site of the excavation. He looked down at the figures, a father and his sons locked in a struggle with monsters from the sea. This was the Laocoön, a statue previously thought to be lost to time, and its rediscovery would change everything. The Laocoön, the statue uncovered on that fateful day, wasn't just any old fragment of marble. It was a long-lost masterpiece of the ancient world, described more than 1,000 years earlier by the Roman writer Pliny the Elder. He had called it the greatest sculpture ever made. The statue is said to have been displayed in the palace of the Emperor Titus, who reigned from 79 to 81 AD, but the work itself could potentially be much older. The dates suggested for the statue range from 200 BC to the 70s AD. Some say that it's an original Hellenistic statue by ancient Greek sculptors, while others argue that it's a Roman copy of an older bronze work. The statue depicts a moment from the Trojan War, one of the defining legends of antiquity. Laocoön, a priest from Troy, warned his people not to accept the great wooden horse left at the gates of the city, and for his defiance, the gods, who favoured the Greeks, sent 2 sea serpents to destroy him and his sons. In the statue, we see Laocoön struggle as the snakes coil around his legs and his chest. His sons twist beside him, their faces caught between terror and pleading. Every muscle is strained, every vein is carved, and every expression is charged with pain. The story of the rediscovery of the Laocoön is actually one of my favourites. It all began in a vineyard on the Esquiline Hill in Rome. In February 1506, a farmer, digging for vines, struck something hard beneath the soil. At first he thought it was rubble, but as the earth was cleared away, marble bodies began to emerge. Word raced through the city. Within hours, crowds had gathered. Artists, scholars, priests, even ambassadors from foreign courts pressed in to see the spectacle, and among them was a man already famous for his genius, Michelangelo Buonarroti. It was pretty much love at first sight for Michelangelo. From the moment he set eyes on the sculpture, the trajectory of his art changed forever. The writhing male forms fascinated him, and his obsession with the Laocoön was reflected in many of his artworks going forward. We'll discuss that later. But it wasn't just Michelangelo. Artists came from far and wide to sketch the Laocoön, to study its straining muscles and its raw emotion. This was a new kind of antiquity. For Renaissance eyes, accustomed to seeing the calm, balanced perfection of ancient statues like the Apollo Belvedere, the Laocoön was shocking. Antiquity suddenly looked far less serene and far more human. This was a vision of beauty made from suffering, a reminder that Greek and Roman art had reached emotional heights as well as intellectual ones. Artists ran wild with this new understanding of the ancients. The Laocoön became a teacher, and no one absorbed its lessons more than Michelangelo. He was there at the excavation, and the statue had haunted him for the rest of his career. It's important to note that before Michelangelo had even seen the Laocoön, his art already portrayed a deep reverence for the harmony of antique sculpture. Think of David, the giant of Florence, completed in 1504. With David, Michelangelo embraced contrapposto, the distinctive pose of antiquity, first perfected in the Doryphorus, sculpted by Polykleitos. One leg bears the weight, the other is relaxed. The body is in perfect harmony. But the Laocoön gave Michelangelo new ideas, replacing harmony with chaos. The balance he'd witnessed in other ancient sculptures was gone, and in its place were bodies pushed to their limit, twisting muscles, strained flesh, and faces contorted in pain. From then on, Michelangelo's figures changed. On the Sistine Chapel ceiling, painted only a few years after the Laocoön was discovered, the influence is clear. Bodies stretch and crane with that same spiralling energy. And decades later, in The Last Judgment, we see a storm of human forms writhing across the altar wall. muscles in crisis, and gestures stretched to the breaking point, which echo the agony of Laocoön and his sons. Even in sculpture, this influence is unmistakable. Look at the dying and the rebellious slaves in the Louvre, carved only a few years after the discovery of the Laocoön. The raised arm of the dying slave with its tilted head, the suspended tension between resistance and collapse. The torso of the rebellious slaves also contorts, in a pose that clearly nods to the Laocoön, but here the struggle is inward. Instead of serpents crushing a priest, these are human souls locked in battle. The Laocoön completely rewired Michelangelo's work. It shifted his art from serene perfection to explosive drama, influencing some of his most iconic works. Another artist who took inspiration from the newly discovered Laocoön was Raphael. This is most obvious in his fresco of the Parnassus, which depicts Apollo alongside famous ancient poets on Mount Parnassus. Raphael painted this fresco around 1509, 3 years after Laocoön's rediscovery, and one of the most striking details of this work, in my opinion, is the way Homer has been represented. His facial expression contorts with the same furrowed brow and hollow-eyed intensity as Laocoön himself. Now, when talking about Renaissance works inspired by the Laocoön, I can't not mention the Venetian painter Titian and his Averoldi polyptych. The pose of Christ in the central panel here blatantly mirrors that of Laocoön. The scene from classical antiquity therefore becomes miraculous as Christ is raised to heaven. In the lower right panel, we see Saint Sebastian. His bound arms and hunched position may also allude to the struggle of Laocoön's sons. The iconic sculpture's influence didn't stop there. Even after the High Renaissance, the generation that followed Raphael and Michelangelo, the Mannerists, were obsessed with the Laocoön. Artists like Rosso Fiorentino and Giulio Romano filled their works with exaggerated, twisting bodies, pushing anatomy to extremes. The Mannerists were influenced by the drama and tension in Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling. They even took his Laocoön-inspired bodies a step further with heightened, vibrant colours and unreal, distorted spatial constructions. The Mannerists' vision of art as drama and as movement all leads back to that moment in the vineyard in 1506. The Laocoön's marble face stares back at us, not only from where it now stands in the Vatican, but from the very fabric of Renaissance art itself. You'll find its ghostly echo in frescoes, in altarpieces, tucked away in the shadowy corners of a cathedral. In some of the most influential artists' sketchbooks, you'll find bodies and expressions reminiscent of those free marble forms. The Laocoön's rediscovery revived a masterpiece, and in doing so, it rewrote the possibilities of what art could be.